you have to answer 10 questions in each part. Lasts about 30 minutes, and then if you're doing the paper test, you get 10 minutes at the end to transfer your answers. So in that 30 minutes when you're listening, you can write anything you want on the question paper, and then afterwards you can transfer your best answer onto the answer sheet. One thing to be very careful of, all the English must be correct. So an example, a very, very common mistake is missing off an S. So if the answer is doctors and you write doctor, you don't get the mark. So there's some techniques you can do to have a look at the question beforehand, and if it says something like some, you know that you need an S. If it says you know you cannot have an S. But it's not always that easy. So use all of the time that you have to check and read the question very, very carefully to not make this mistake. So set 4 different sections, 10 questions in each. Part 1 and Part 2 are 2 or more people speaking, conversations. And Part 2 and Part 4, this is just one person talking. So you don't have the question and answer to help you follow. So you need to be listening really carefully to pick out when the answer will be given and not get distracted by all of the other information. Part 4 in particular can be a 6 or 7 minute academic lecture. So there's a lot of information and you're just picking out 10 words to get the full marks there. So, for example, section 1 is an everyday conversation. So it might be somebody booking a hotel, arranging student accommodation. So it's testing your ability to kind of live in a foreign country. Part 2, there might be somebody giving a talk about staying safe while traveling overseas, or how to apply to a job. So it's just one person giving a speech, but again, about an everyday situation, everyday topic. But then Part 3 and Part 4, these are the more academic topics. It's testing your ability to work or study. So there might be a discussion between different students, and you need to know who is talking at any particular time. So there might be one person giving their opinion, another person giving their opinion, and you need to be able to follow that. And then Part 4, as I said, it'd be a university-style lecturer. It's 6 to 7 minutes, and you need to be able to pick out and answer the questions based on that. This is the key thing that gets a lot of people, the distractors. They're going to put in lots of information that they're not trying to trick you, but you need to be very careful that you're directly answering the question. So if it says here, when is the booking date? Okay, I just have to fill out this form for you, so what date do you want to book the hotel room? Going, okay, I'm listening for my answer here, but if you just write down the first date you hear, it might leave you distracted, because they say the 16th of October, and some people go, oh, okay, and then write it down. You have to be very careful, because then, oh no, sorry, that's my departure date. I arrive the day after. So before you start listening, you've got some time to read through the questions. You want to be thinking, how might they distract me? So it's asking for what date do you want to book the hotel room for? What other dates might they mention in the test? So just be ready for that. Listen for ideas and exact words all the way through the IELTS test. There's heavy use of synonyms and paraphrasing. You're not just listening for that word and then matching your answer in. You need to be able to listen for an idea and be aware that it's much more flexible. Improve your spelling, especially words like this, Wednesday, February. These are very likely to come up, and if you get the wrong spelling, no mark, unfortunately. So, especially for common spellings, be very, very clear with that. And make sure you're practicing in an environment like the test. So if you're doing the computer test, do it in a similar way. If you're doing a paper test, make sure you're practicing in an open environment with lots of distractions, because that can be a bit of a shock sometimes. That's the listening test. Very quickly rolling through this. If you've got any questions at any time, feel free to let me know, or otherwise I can answer questions at the end as well. So, reading. Here, this is the joke we often make. The reading test isn't really a reading test. It's a finding the answers in a reading text quickly test. You don't have time to read everything and understanding it. We're not reading a novel. I wish sometimes. So there's 3 articles. This is for the academic test. The general test is slightly different. But you have 3 articles with about 800 words each, and you have 60 minutes to answer 40 questions. So your techniques here are really, really important to be able to find these answers effectively. There's 2 main techniques we're going to talk about here, skimming and scanning. And you need to use these together to be able to find the answers quickly, and then also make sure you're being accurate. So skimming is just reading through very, very quickly, not trying to understand everything, but trying to get the main idea. And the key point here is not really to answer the question. You'd never find the answer with skimming, but you may know which paragraph I'm going to find the answer, because then you can go straight to that paragraph and find it more quickly. So, skimming a stone. And then scanning, this is looking for a particular idea within the text. So the technique I'll talk about in a moment, you want to skim through quickly to have a general idea of what the text is talking about. What is each paragraph talking about? Then when you read a question, you can think, oh, I think that's in paragraph 3, I think that's in paragraph 5. You go to paragraph 5, and then you scan through that paragraph, looking for the idea of the question. And then once you find that idea, you can read that sentence, or those 2 sentences, or however much you need, very, very carefully. If you can find where the answer will be, it gives you more time to be accurate, to make sure you don't fall for a trick or give the wrong answer or something. So this scanning is finding the keywords and, more importantly, the ideas, because they will use paraphrasing just like the listening. They will change the language. So you find the ideas within that paragraph. So if you're looking at a departure board in an airport like this, you're not going to start reading Edinburgh or London. It's not how we read. So it's the same thing in this test. It's testing your ability to find it quickly, and then once you've found where you're going, you can then read that particular small section very, very carefully to find the answer. So I've put some strategies on here. With the person next to you, can you say if this is a good strategy or a bad strategy for the reading test? So is it a good idea to read the text very carefully to understand it entirely? Is that a good technique? Yeah, not really. You don't have time. I wish. Some of the articles are very interesting, and maybe you want to read them later. But in the test itself, you do not have time. You've only got 20 minutes per article, and you need to be spending as much time as you can to ensure that you're getting the correct answer, not enjoying the text. Underline and mark the text. Absolutely, because sometimes you might have some time to go back and check, and especially when you're practicing, you want to look at the answer, be able to find where you found the answer, and if you're wrong, this can really help you find out what went wrong. Why did you make that mistake? And then you can improve later on. So definitely mark down where you found the answer. There you go. Follow the instructions. Of course, yeah, absolutely. Sometimes they will say you can use each letter more than once. So there's a question where it says, find which paragraph contains the following information, and there may be 2 of them in one paragraph, whereas other ones you may not be able to. So make sure you're taking the time to read those questions carefully. And if you have a difficulty with a particular question, do you reread the passage as often as necessary to find the answer? Yeah. Don't want to be doing that, because you've only got 20 minutes. So you're not going to get 100%. That's not the aim here. You're trying to get the score that you want. Nobody gets 100%. Well, some people do, but very few. It's testing everyone's ability from a complete beginner to a complete expert in the language. So we're just trying to get as many as you can within the time limit. And if you're spending too long on one, you might miss 3, 4, 5 others, and that's not what we're trying to do. So let's look at a very common question. You'll almost certainly get one of these in your reading test at some point. True, false, not given. Here, some people often get a little bit confused between false and not given. If it's true, they'll give you a statement, and if it's true, you need to find every single part of that statement in the text. So I'll give you an example later on, but if there's 3 different things in the statement, all 3 of those things need to be true. If it's false, you must be able to underline in the text where it says it's not true. Even just one part of it, that's okay. But the statement cannot be true. Even if you are certain it's not true, if you cannot find it in the text, not given. It can be very, very subtle. So let's have a look at the example. So the technique for this, just we talked about before, skim through the paragraphs. You read the statement, you guess which paragraph it's in. You then scan through that paragraph looking for the idea. If it's not there, it's not given. If it is there, we're going to choose between true and false. So then you slow down and find every single part of the statement. Let's look at this example. So Macallan, which is generally made in Scotland, is one of the 4 top-selling brands of whiskey in the world. It's manufactured in barrels made of Spanish oak, as this adds to its flavour. So we have 3 statements. Macallan is globally successful, it's made in metal containers, and it's made in a large factory. Again, with the person next to you, which one of these is true, which one is false, which one is not given, based on this short paragraph? So globally successful is true. It's one of the top 4 selling whiskey brands in the world. Globally successful. Made in metal containers? False, because it says Spanish oak. Oak is a type of wood. So you need to know that in that case. It's made in a large factory. Not given, probably, but it doesn't say it here. If it's one of the largest whiskey brands, almost certainly in a large factory, but it doesn't say it in the text, so it's not given. One of the most common mistakes. There's lots of different questions. You need to be familiar with them all, really, before you go in, because there's the techniques are relatively similar, but you've got to be aware of exactly what the question's asking you to do. So summary completion is you'll have another paragraph that be paraphrased from the text, and you need to be able to take the words from the text to fill in the gaps. Short answer completion, so it just gives you a question, you need to give an answer. Again, taking the words directly from the text. Yes, no, not given is pretty much the same as true, false, not given, but it's about opinions. So there's lots and lots of different questions. So some tips. Look for synonyms, so words which mean the same thing. You most likely will not see exactly the same word in the question and in the text. And if you do, be careful, because that might be misleading. Not always, but sometimes. There's a balance. Don't think too long, but don't guess. It's kind of somewhere in between. If you can find where the answer is going to be quickly, that gives you longer to kind of analyse what you're writing down. Familiarise yourself with different question types. We just talked about that. You don't want to be spending too long working out what the question's going to want you to do, because that's wasting time, and time is of the essence in this particular test. And stick to the time limit. Sometimes it can be tempting. You've got one more question. I'll spend an extra 3 minutes. Move on. Because the chances are that one question is quite difficult if you're leaving it that far on, and you're probably better spent trying to find 2 or 3 in the next part of the next section. So 20 minutes, be strict with yourself. You might want to spend less time on part 1 to give yourself more for part 3, because it's slightly more academic, slightly higher level language towards the end. But that comes through experimentation. You need to know for yourself what's best for yourself. Everybody's favourite, writing. Maybe not. The one people worry about, maybe writing and speaking. Spend a little bit more time on these. 2 tasks. Again, with the general English test, most people take the academic statistics on that, but this is talking about the academic test today. Task 1 is worth 33% of your grade, therefore you need to spend 33% of your time. You don't want to spend more than 20 minutes on this. You have to write about 100, well, minimum 150 words. You want to be around that, and this will give you some kind of information. There could be a chart, graph, 2 maps, a diagram outlining a process. So it's some kind of information, and you just need to analyze it and detail it. That's it. You do not add any of your own ideas. You're not giving your opinion on anything. You're not saying, I think this process can be done a better way. None of that. We're just taking the information and then describing it in English. Summarizing. You don't have to necessarily detail everything. You've got your 150 words, 150 to 200 words in 20 minutes. If there's lots of information, you need to pick which is the most important. If there's not much information, you need to describe everything. It depends on the question. And then task 2, if this is worth 33, this is worth 66, it's 2/3 of your marks, and then you spend 2/3 of your time, 40 minutes. And this is where your own ideas come in. I'll go through some different question types in a minute, but this one you really need to plan and come up with your own ideas and explain and give examples. Very, very different styles of questions. One's a report, one's an essay. So, task 1, as we said, you can get a pie chart with percentages. Be super careful with these. They can be a little bit tricky to describe. Line chart showing the change over time. We can have a table. But you would never answer a table differently from a pie chart necessarily. It's about the information they give you, not how they've given it to you. So you need to think what they're trying to show you and then describe that in the best possible way. They might give you 2 maps. So here's one in 1980 and one in 2005, and you need to detail the changes that they have made or have been made using different language. Or here is how milk is processed and then sold in shops, and you need to detail that step by step by step. I normally would recommend a 4-paragraph structure for writing task 1. Some kind of an introduction. I'll give you an example of this later on. So you need to paraphrase the question. The question will give you the topic. But we need to show the examiner that we have a strong control of our English. So we don't want to just repeat the same language straight back to them. So we're going to paraphrase. So we just say the same thing using different language. I'll give you an example of that later. Then we give an overview. If you imagine you're reading this report and you cannot see the original data, so you're trying to understand what you're trying to be told, you want to give an overview which is a general view of the main trends. And this will give context for the detail later on. So it gives a general overview and then 2 paragraphs where you take the information, split it into 2 groups, and detail them in a little bit more detail. But everything you write here will also be here, but this is just far simpler. It just makes it easier to understand what they're saying here. If you cannot see the chart, if you cannot see the map, if you cannot see the table. So this is the question. The chart shows the proportion of the population of citizens aged over 65 in 3 countries from 1940 to 2040. So this is what would be given to you. Summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features. This is the same for every single writing task ever. The first part is the part you need to paraphrase. So here, the chart, we can say the line graph. Chart, graph. If the question says graph, we say chart. Yeah, job done. Provide shows, we can say provides information about. If it says provides information about, we say shows. Just switch between them. The percentage of people, the proportion of people in 3 countries, in US, Sweden, and Japan, from, to, between, and. So it's saying exactly the same thing, we're just putting it in our own words to introduce the topic, so the reader knows what you're going to describe. Then our overview. I wouldn't take a picture of this one. What's wrong with this overview? If you read through here, it can seem that Japan decreased until 1980, but then increased suddenly and will continue to increase in the future. Meanwhile, the USA and Sweden both too much information. Too detailed. Yeah, it's too detailed. An overview should be trying to describe everything in as few words as you can, really. It's just there to give the reader context so they know what they're going to be reading. The detail goes in the next 2 paragraphs. So, it can be seen that the percentage of the population aged 65 and over in each of these 3 countries is expected to increase by 2040. It's talking about all 3 countries, it's talking about the entire period, and it increases over time. And then the fact that this is lower than this one, and it rises sharply here, leave that for the body paragraph. Don't add too much to that overview. Who goes? Right, writing task 2. How are we doing on time? There's lots and lots of different question types here, and they need to be answered in a relatively different way. So you have to be very familiar with these types. To what extent do you agree or disagree? Asking for your opinion. Discuss the advantages and then the disadvantages. Is not asking for your opinion, but then it says, and give your opinion. So you have to discuss both sides of the argument and give your opinion. Then the same, what are some problems associated with this topic, whatever topic they give you, and suggest some solutions. So here you're going to talk about a problem caused by something, and then offer your own solutions, thinking who can do something, what they can do, and why that would help solve this problem. It really requires you to think deeply about the topic. And if you want the higher marks, you need to be able to explain them in a very logical order, not just throwing lots of different ideas in. And what are the causes of this problem? So why does this problem exist, and solutions. So there's and then 2 parts. This is just 2 completely different questions you might need to answer. There are similarities. So advantages and disadvantages is very similar to discuss both sides. And then giving your opinion, you're going to use lots of the same language. And then 2 of them have solutions. So you'll find there's similarities, but you must answer the question. If it asks you for advantages, disadvantages, and you just give your opinion, you're not going to get the score you want. So make sure you're being very careful to plan your answer. The number 1 tip that I would have here is plan. Spend a good amount of time. Even if everyone around you is kind of scribbling on their paper, you can relax. Think about what you're going to write. It will help you in the long run. So, as an example, some people think studying history is a waste of time, while others think it's important to learn. Discuss both sides and give your opinion. So you've got 2 sides of an opinion. One, instructions here. So why is learning about history a waste of time? And why is it important to learn about history? And you must discuss both sides, even if you love history. You can be a historian, and that could be your career and your passion, and you still have to write why history is a waste of time. Kind of. Why may some people argue that history is a waste of time? Even if you have a very strong opinion, you can leave that already. And then before you start writing, you need to plan your ideas, because 2 reasons for this. One, it will help with your structure. A good amount of your grade is going to come from the logical ordering of ideas, your coherence, how well it flows. And if you are thinking as you're writing, it's just not going to flow naturally. But also, if you come up with a really bad idea, it's much easier to change it when you're planning than it is when you're halfway through the essay and you realize you've got a bad idea and there's no way to change it. So you want to be coming up with ideas before you pick up your pen. So here you could say, things change, so history is not relevant to the present day. I do not believe this, but some people may argue. And history is a subject that focuses on memorization rather than critical thinking. Again, debatable, but it can be argued. And then history helps people to understand culture, behavior, and society, and learning about past terrible events is essential for not repeating it. So you come up with these clear reasons for one side of the argument and the other side of the argument, then you choose your opinion, and then you're ready to start writing. The structure, also 4 paragraphs, but each will be longer, 250 words here. Introduction, introduce the essay and give your opinion. You need to show the examiner, I have read the question, I have a clear plan, and here is everything. just lay it out for them, make it really obvious, make it easy for them to give you marks. Body 1 would be one side of the argument, and then body 2 would be the other side of the argument, so 2 main paragraphs. And you have to be very logical about how you explain each of these ideas. And then a conclusion at the end. So just summarize your ideas, restating your opinion. Going to be the shortest paragraph. It does not need to be overly complicated. This is where you're going to get the majority of your score. So, some tips for the writing. No opinions in task 1. Do not add your opinions. Don't say this is a bad process. But read the task 2 question very, very carefully. It's very common that people misunderstand something and in a rush to get going, answer the wrong question. You don't want to answer your own question. You have to answer the one they give you, unfortunately, sometimes. Using academic writing style. IELTS is kind of semi-academic. When you're a lot of you, I'm sure, are going to study abroad, you need to be using an academic style, and it can help in your IELTS here. Got an example of that later. And have someone check your writing. Could be anyone who's preferably someone with IELTS experience is always good, but having a second set of eyes, and just be super careful with model answers. There's some great things on the internet, there's also some interesting things. So try and have a style, try to stick with it, be very careful with materials. There's some fantastic stuff online, but just be critical of what you're using. Speaking, the other one everyone loves. So this is graded on 4 different parts, and each of these are equal. Lots of people focus on this. There's only 25% of your grade, the grammar. It's also the word choice that you use. For the higher marks, you need to be using the particular word we'd use in a particular moment, preferably, rather than kind of using words like things. Try to avoid if you can. Fluency and coherence. This is how well your answer just flows, how naturally you're linking ideas together, how much hesitation there is, how much you correct what you're saying. So often, your grammar and your vocab, if you spend too long focused on those, your fluency and coherence will go down. And if you put your fluency and coherence up, the grammar and vocab go down. It's kind of this balancing act, and you just need to be doing that. That's okay. We're not aiming for perfection. It does not need to be perfect, even to get a very high score. But you do need to be relatively fluent, coherent, answering the question. In the pronunciation, 25%. This is both at the word level, so saying the words correctly, but this is also in the sentence level. So we don't speak like this, we speak like this. However, intonation, we're going up, we're going down. Like the stress, which words do you stress in the sentence? This kind of thing, all very, very important. 3 parts. I think I've spoken to a few of you today down here who are talking about this, but part 1 is about you. They're topics that you should know relatively well, general questions. Just because the questions are easier does not mean it's any less important. It's still worth the same as your part 2 and the same as your part 3, so you've got to start strong. Several questions with several topics. So they'll go through different topics, and you want to give 2 or 3 sentence answers using interesting language, high-level language where you can, but it's got to sound natural, and it's just a conversation. Part 2, this is the one that scares people, but don't worry, it takes some time. It's called the long turn. You have to talk for 2 minutes about a topic. They'll give you a topic, you have 60 seconds to prepare, really important 60 seconds, to come up with some ideas, and then you speak for 1 to 2 minutes, but aim for 2 minutes if you're going for a higher score. And part 3, this is the extended discussion. It's the same topic as the part 2, but they'll go more into depth, a little bit more abstract, a little bit more academic with the questions. It's no longer about yourself. This is going to be about other people, about society and the world in general. The topics the questions might seem a little bit more difficult, but you just got to keep pushing through, say something. Even you do not need to be an expert about every topic. You do want to be able to just say something about each topic. So, an example. Part 1, ask some questions about yourself and talk about your hometown. So where is your hometown? Is your hometown a popular place for tourists? Has your hometown changed much since you were a child? And looking at this one's asking you to talk about the past and then talk about change. You're not using present perfect tenses and things like this. Is the popular place for tourists, analysing where you live and why it's popular, giving reasons and examples. As I said, 2 or 3 sentences, but they should be complex, kind of 2 verbs, using lots of linking together. So let's take this as an example. Is this a good answer? Not great. So yes, it's quite popular. What's wrong? Too short.
No supporting ideas.
No supporting ideas, no examples, no explanation. It's also, are any of the words repeated in the question? Oh, don't know why it's doing that. Popular, yeah. So we try not to if we can. Again, you don't want to add too much hesitation to be able to do this, but try to mix up the language where you can. So we can say, yes. You don't need to say it's popular. Yes, lots of people want to see 101. Is there any linking? So we need to use the mark schemes is a range of cohesive devices. We need to use ways of linking our ideas together. So we can say, it's not as much of a tourist destination as other cities, but it's becoming more of one. So talking about change. I think the biggest reason for this is Taipei 101, which people see on TV during New Year's and want to see for themselves. So again, high level because we're linking sentences together, complex sentences, but which, and we're using tourist destination. It's kind of high level words. The biggest reason, not as much as, so kind of superlatives and different forms of comparatives. So we need to be confident to use this language. But the key thing is, it's not just knowing this language, it's knowing it well enough that when you're in that really high pressure test, you're sat in the little room and someone's asking you questions, you're confident enough to use it. So you need to know it very, very, very well to be using it in that high stress situation. So it's not really about how much you know, it's about how much you're willing to use in the test. Yeah. Some other topics could be about friends, could be about daily routine, but it could also be less usual things. It could be about jewelry or flowers. You kind of need to be ready to talk about anything. But you don't need to be an expert. It's not testing your knowledge, it's testing your English. Right, part 2. This is definitely everyone's favourite. Describe a famous person, living or dead, you would like to meet. It will give you 4 different prompts. Why you would like to meet them, what you would say to them, what you would do with this person, and explain the role they played in history. And you have 60 seconds to come up with some ideas. So I would recommend coming up with the famous person within 5 seconds, maybe, because you don't want to waste any time. Just whoever comes into your head, go with them. It does not matter. They're not going to test your knowledge of their history. You can kind of make it up. I don't recommend it because it's more difficult to come up with the ideas, but if you're stuck, feel free to if you say something that's not true, it will not affect your score at all. So don't worry about that. And then part 3. These are, as I said, based on the past topic. So they might say, do you think that famous people such as singers and movie stars are paid too much? So again, it's not about you, it's about other people. Would you agree that famous people are good role models for young children? So do you agree or disagree? Opinion, how do you think people's lives become different if they suddenly become famous? And then this one needs to be a little bit longer, 3 or 4 sentence answers, a little bit more detailed. Rush through this a little bit. So be careful with will. So if it's a hypothetical, so if people became famous, you have to say they would be asked. Very common mistake, will versus would. And then we've got photographs. We can use a higher level language by saying something, they will be asked for lots of selfies. Again, pushing it a little bit more. And what's going on here? So they would be asked for selfies a lot. Well, I think this would be fun for a few weeks. I guess that would become very annoying. high level. We go high level again. I think it depends. A great phrase to use here, it depends. So you talk about one side or about the other side. So for some people, they would love the attention of being asked for selfies. However, I believe that many people would find this not to be enjoyable after a while. So it's a little bit more complex, using different languages, different ways, using linked together. Just very aware of time, bear with me. So tips, give examples. You don't want to go too specific, but giving examples of what you've just said is a great way of adding detail. But say your answer and stop. Some people just keep trying to talk, keep trying to add ideas, and that can add hesitation and lower that coherence. So have your idea, explain it, give an example, and stop. Wait for the next question. Use your highest level of vocabulary and grammar possible. Sometimes, again, you're in a high-stress situation, and you're trying to a little bit shy maybe, or you're kind of a little bit worried to make a mistake. You've really got to push yourself to use that language and get comfortable doing that. And have someone check. Again, if you're listening to yourself, you can record yourself on your phone and listen back. That can be quite helpful. Also, just getting that immediate feedback, practice in front of people. Because it's very different talking to somebody than talking to yourself in your study or your bedroom. Quiz. Going to rush through this. In fact, we'll come back to these. With the person next to you, how many sections are there in the listening test? Yeah, 3 or 4? 4, absolutely. Yeah, 4 sections. How much time do you have to transfer your answers at the end? 10 minutes. Yeah, for the paper-based test, it's different for the computer-based. You get slightly less time because it's easier. 2 minutes. You will hear each part of the listening test only once. True or false? True. Also, a little bit different from some other tests. You only hear it once. If you missed it, you missed it. So using every opportunity you have to make sure you're ready beforehand is super, super important. How many questions are there? 40, yeah, absolutely. 40 questions to answer, quite a lot, 10 in each section. Some common types of questions in the IELTS reading test. Can you remember any?
Yes, no, not given.
Yes, no, not given.
Summary.
Summary completion, the gap fills. True, false, not given for the factual one, yeah. Matching the headings to the paragraph. This one can be a tricky one, where they'll give you a list of headings and you have to match them to each paragraph. And there's no perfect answer sometimes. You have to make the one that best fits the whole paragraph. Labeling a diagram. These ones look scary, they're not too bad. You have time to transfer your answers at the end of the reading test, true or false? It's not given. False, not this one. Listening test, yes. Reading test, you have to have filled it out at the end of that time. 60 minutes in total. So 20 minutes for each test. Be very, very consistent. You're expected to give your opinion about the data for writing task 1.
False.
Absolutely false. Do not do that, please. Yeah. What writing style should you use in the writing test?
Academic.
Academic. As much as possible, academic writing style. So there's an example here. There are a lot of cars in Taipei. We can see there is heavy traffic in Taipei. There are more and more people, a significant number of people. Yeah. This kind of thing. What's the most common mistakes? Briefly talked about this. Don't answer the question. If you don't answer the question, the score's not going to be particularly strong. So it's a big part of the marking test. In part 1 of the speaking test, they'll ask you easy or difficult questions. Easier. Yeah, never say easy. But just because they're easier questions does not mean it's not important. So make sure you're pushing yourself with high-level language, high-level grammar. Yeah. You should be exhausted after this test because you've just given everything to it. You can speak for longer than 2 minutes in part 2. False. No, absolutely not. They'll cut you off. They'll just stop you. That's okay. Don't worry if they do that. That's not a problem. And 1 minute to prepare in speaking part 3. False. No, only part 2. Part 1, part 3, conversation. So, we're finishing now. I think I've gone over, I'm sorry. Yeah, it's genuinely an English test. It's testing your ability to communicate in English. So everything you do to prepare for your IELTS is genuinely helpful if you're studying or working or living abroad. So think about the investment you're putting into it. It's not just for this test. It's not just to get that piece of paper. It's how can you talk, how can you read, how can you listen in English. Every student's different. So if it's taking you longer than some other people, that's completely normal. People struggle at different things. Just take your time, be patient, and you can absolutely do it. Okay. That's it. Thank you very much. If you've got any questions, I'll be here. Keep it out. Thank you very much.